Hello, welcome to the Whisky Exchange, and I'm very excited to have the wonderful, irrepressible George Grant with me today. Now, if you hear George referring to me as Alan at any time during this conversation, you can ask him why, because none of us are really sure. Apparently, I'm called Alan. So, George, welcome. Super excited to have you here today. Slightly sad that you're not in the building with us because we know you like wearing your specialty drinks t-shirt at all times. As a loyal fan of the Whisky Exchange.
Of course, you're always going to have your top.
Always gotta have your top. So George, yeah, I think we've had a really long history with Glenfarclas as a company, and I think it's kind of one of those whiskies that just everyone loves. I know whenever we do our whiskey of the years, Glenfarclas 15 comes up time and time again. It's kind of one of those go-to brands. I think if you're just sort of starting out in whiskey and you have you don't know where to really go, a lot of people will say, I know when I'm in the shop, I always say, oh, Glenfarclas, But what do you think kind of for you makes Glenfarclas? I think I read somewhere you said you're not Speyside, because Speyside is huge and gigantic. You're kind of Glenfarclas. But what is it? Is it, dare I say it, terroir?
I think what's always been nice about Glenfarclas is, because obviously everyone talks about Speyside. Speyside's got quite a few big distilleries here, and they spend an absolute fortune marketing their product. But what's always nice about Glenfarclas is we're the whiskey that's sort of drunk by everybody. We don't spend money on marketing, we don't spend the money on promotions, but it's a whiskey that's always sort of underrated. It's the one that always people talk about, and it's when you do listen or speak to people that work in other whiskey companies, Glenfarclas is always like in their top 3 of your favorite whiskies when they're not talking about their own brands. We're just us, I guess, which is why you love us so much.
And I think that's true. I think, it isn't, you've got everyone knows, that bottle is Glenfarclas. And I think there is something very, very iconic about the brand. It is one of those kind of go-to brands. And, when I went up with Sekinda to look at some of the sort of casks up there, it was absolutely, remember, it's absolutely Baltic. And your guys are fantastic up there. George actually forgot we were coming, so didn't turn up, just as an FYI.
I was here earlier, but you stopped at the whiskey shop to get roadies, if I seem to remember.
Do we? I don't remember that one. But I think what sort of struck me was just how freaking cold it was. And we talk a little bit about kind of, the one thing I'm quite interested in is about the kind of the terroir of the cellar, of where you age and how much of an influence that has on the actual product. And I just remember standing there thinking, if I don't get somewhere warm, I'm going to kill myself. It doesn't matter how much whiskey I drink. And how much do you think about that sort of aging, that dunnage warehouses has an influence on who you guys are?
I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, like you said, when you walk into the warehouses in the height of winter, these warehouses feel quite warm. But the difference is during winter to summer, the temperature doesn't really vary by sort of more than 8 to 10 degrees inside the warehouse. So that all the whiskies maturing at the same time all the way through. And then also because the casks are only stored 3 high, again, the whiskey at the bottom row versus the top row is exactly the same temperature. Walk into a racked warehouse, you're going to be 12 degrees warmer at the top than you are at the bottom. So, but we still have difference in the warehouse as well. I mean, you've got some of the older ones. You definitely still have ones that are a little bit damper than the others. You've got because obviously they're all on a slight slope. So obviously there's the bottom part of the warehouses are a little bit wetter underneath than the bits at the top.
And I think that does make a huge difference, that humidity and the we talk a lot about wet and dry cellars in cognac, and for me it's something that's really, really interesting. And I think
because we age we age Hind early landed here as well. So Eric Forget came across and spent days going around all the warehouses, trying to find the one that had the the highest humidity and stuff. So,
and I mean, Eric's awesome, and I think he's such an interesting guy to talk to, and he's very much. I mean, he's probably one of the people that's taught me a lot about kind of that humidity and that wet and dry cellar. Because behind as you say, it's so important. And actually, talking about that, you've been really interesting about doing quite a lot of different collaborations with people recently, haven't you, from different spirit categories, which is really interesting. What kind of prompted that?
I guess it was, Hein was probably the start of it, I suppose. But it's the question that people always ask us. They always say, "Are you experimenting with anything? Are you doing this? Are you doing that?" And we always go back and just say no, and they go, "Why aren't you doing this?" And you sort of have to say, well, the things that people are doing in the industry now, we did it 100 years ago or whatever. So when Hein came and said we'd like to, it was actually Eric and I that decided to do it ourselves, because at the time we both had the same distributor in the UK, but we realized that we probably wouldn't have the same distributor, in 14, 15 years time. So we did it personally, sort of thing. And then they came back and asked if we do the early landed stuff as well. But basically, everybody else was doing finishes. So we were like, well, we're not going to do a finish. We were going to take a Hind cognac cask that's had cognac in it, bring it to Scotland and put our new make spirit in it. And after 15 years or whatever, it'll be ready to go. And then since that, we've done it with a rum company. We've always done it with port casks. We've always done it with different types of sherry. So we never ever finish in these casks, but it's there for the whole maturation period.
And actually, finishing is really interesting because I've been talking a lot about it to different distillers, and it's kind of like a lot of people are kind of either, yeah, it's the new thing and everyone's doing it, and you think, what's it actually bringing? Do you realize what's happening with that port cask or that Madeira cask? And I think a lot of people don't really understand the product that was in it before, so how it's going to actually influence. And there's a lot of bad finishes out there. So I think it's really nice what you're doing is actually saying, I want that character from the liquid.
And that's the thing, I mean, it's a much longer term project, obviously, because we're not going to, it's not something you can start 3 months ago and look, it's ready. It is going to be decades in the making. So it'll be ready for your retirement, Alan. So.
I thought you told me I wasn't ever going to be able to retire for the rest of my life.
It was very scary. Yesterday it was a very daunting thing. So yesterday was my birthday, and because of the whole COVID thing, thank you. It was the first time ever that we've distilled on my birthday and filled on my birthday. So I filled 6 casks, 6 hoggies yesterday on my birthday. And I was like, oh, great, we'll bottle these up in 16 years' time when I turn 60. And you're just suddenly going, oh my God. And luckily enough, it's also the same year will be the 200th anniversary of Glenfarclas. So it'll be like a double bottling.
And so remember, we are the same birth year. So if it's your 60th, it's my 60th, which means that I should also have a bottle.
Well, hopefully more than a bottle.
I love it. Well, we're definitely celebrating that one together.
For sure.
And and I think it's super interesting that it's about that legacy, isn't it? It's about that long term. And I think now we're so driven by marketeers that want short term. And this is where you guys have an advantage in my book, that you're not driven by marketing because you don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, true, but when it's ready, it's ready. So, and we want it to taste nice, and we want to appreciate it. We're not just going to do it for the sake of doing it. Which is
the best way to be. And I think I'll be super interested to see how that cognac cask comes, because I think I think there's a really lovely synergy between the two kind of products.
Yeah, the whole reason why it came about was Eric and I did a tasting at Imbibe about a decade ago, and we were doing the family cask, and we had 5 family casks, and he picked the same vintages of cognac, and when you actually tasted them side by side, there was a lot of similarities, which was quite surprising.
Oh, that's interesting. And then, you know, talking about the family cast, because that's something that's kind of become more and more of a focus, it feels like, for you guys over the years, you know, whereas I remember when I started selling Glenfarclas back in the day, you know, it was all about the kind of the core range, and suddenly all these sort of family casts are sort of, and now, you know, you're doing so many of them, and how has that sort of come about? Is that sort of been something that was always kind of in the back of your heads, or?
No, I mean, bizarrely, I mean, it's been around for what, 13, 14 years now. So when we actually launched it in London, I didn't think it was going to be a big success, so I went on holiday. Um, there was only the one man that turned up to tasted every single one of them, because there was 43 in the original launch. And somebody
being someone that maybe is directly above me.
Yeah. So hats off to him. But it's just grown arms and legs. I mean, it's just been incredible. Because when we launched it, malt whiskey was just starting to like have that boom time. But now, when we sold the first set of family casks, you could have bought them in retail for 13 grand. And now you're what, 170 grand? You know, so it's just incredible.
And do you have like any favorites, like any vintages, or that you kind of keep going back to, or?
Yes and no, but I mean, like the favorite ones are all gone now. I mean, or they suddenly get too expensive to drink.
I know every time we come to you, Sukinder's always like, I want 60s, 70s. Yeah, like, and then he sees the price, he's like, I don't want these. George, what's going on?
Yeah, but I mean, people forget. I mean, like, when Sukinder first started drinking these whiskies, 30 years has gone by.
And actually, some of the ones we've done that are younger have been really nice. Like, you know, I remember when we were up there last time, I think it was in 2005, was it, that I think we ended up picking, or I can't remember which one it was that we did a cask of, which was beautiful.
But the younger ones are really, really, really good. I mean, because we just put out the new release of the family casks last week, and they're all gone. I mean, it's just like the distributors have bought them, so you can still obviously get them, but it's the distributors have snapped them all up. I mean, your parents before we'd bottle a cask up, and it'd be like 2 years later you do another one. Now it's every 3 or 4 months you're having to replace all of them. So.
Which, you know, is an incredible success. And how do you manage that with sort of just having the consistency and the standardization on the other ranges? Because there must be at some point a period where you go, okay, I've got these casks, but I've got to make this whiskey, and I have to have the consistency on the standard, because at the end of the day, that's bread and butter.
I mean, with the family casks, though, we've not always just done first fill sherry casks. We've not always just done, you know, butts. So I've mixed it up, your first, second, third, fourth fill casks. But obviously, originally when we started it, we had much more stock. But we're now not bottling any of the family casks pre-77. So once those casks run out, there'll be no more of them. So that's been a decision, because we want to keep some of the older stuff for other special editions or different things. You know, so we're trying to keep some whiskey to be a 70-year-old. You know, we've got plans for the future, so that's it.
And I think that's the hard thing with whiskey, isn't it? It's always that you've got to think about, it's not about the next 5, it's about the next 45 years and how you manage those stocks. And it's something I think a lot of people don't really comprehend at all.
And it's changed so much recently, because before, you know, everything was bulk. You basically, as soon as you made it, you'd sell it. You know, going back 50, 60 years ago. Now it's, well, you want to keep some of it, but it's that age-old thing. Okay, a company wants to buy 10,000 cases of 25-year-old, and you're like, well, if that's all the whiskey I've got, for example, if I sell it all now, then I don't have 30-year-old in 5 years' time. I don't have 40-year-old in 15 years' time. But then the thing is, well, do you take the money now, or do you wait? But then again, in 10, 15 years' time, we might be in a slump again, and nobody's buying this whiskey. So,
if only we had a what's it
crystal
called?
ball.
Crystal ball. That's what I'm like. What are those things? Round things. I mean, like one of the things I think everyone is really, when they think about you guys, is they think about sherry casks, and you know the sherry casks are hugely important. But my feeling is a lot of people don't really understand sherry, full stop. And you know, is it sherry? Is it not sherry? Is it from a Slera? Is it not from a Slera? No, it's not from a Slera. You know, how are you guys finding management of that sort of? Because you've had a long-term relationship with the sherry producer, haven't you? So are you still finding?
Yeah, so we've been with the same sherry producer since 1988. Actually, we got a shipment of casks arrived yesterday. I mean, it's a great one of those things. You know, I can't go to Spain, but he's able to drive back and forth as many times as he wants.
Bubble yourself in the back.
Hello. So we're fortunate as well because we've been with the same company for such a long time. We're able to continue to get the supply, and they also know what sort of cask we're looking for. We're not looking for, you know, having sherry in it for 3 months. We wanted to have been in there for 4 or 5 years longer. When Miguel came over here, you know, we did actually show him, you know, the old sherry cask that we've got, and we said, you know, we want to try and match it as close to this as possible. We know it's not possible to do it exactly the same, but we want to get it as good as. So,
and you know,
it's just having that understanding.
And I think you're right. It's that relationship with the bodega producers, and I think, you know, because at the moment, even though people tell me I'm wrong, I'm finding a lot of problems with sulfur in whiskey. And not necessarily from the stills. I'm 90% sure it's coming from cask, because it seems to be on certain types of casks, e.g. wine casks, which in my head, people think, maybe there's a little sulfur problem. How do you manage something like that? And how, do you think that is more of a problem, or do you think that's just quality of barrels and the producers?
I think it's just also different sort of styles or people have had different ideas at different times of what they think is a good idea. Again, they might have used your sulfur candles again, 4 or 5 years ago in these casks, and you don't know about it until it comes through. We still go down to Spain. I've been down. My father still goes down every year, you know, to see the casks and knows the casks. But again, because we have been dealing with the same people for such a long period of time, they know exactly what we're looking for. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's again, it's coming back to those relationships and that you know, kind of ability to trust the person you're working with, because actually the most important thing about barrels is the quality of the oak and what's gone in them. You know, I think a lot of people don't think about that. They just think, oh, there's a sherry butt, I shall buy it because I need some sherry, and they don't realize that the quality of the beginning product is so important.
It's huge, yeah, and you're right. People don't appreciate that at all.
Yeah, I know. Well, one of the topics we're going to have at Virtual Whiskey Show is going to be on why wood matters. So, we're.
Please tell me it's Dr. Bill that's doing it.
No, actually, he's not.
No.
I can't remember who's on the panel. I've got some wood geeks. I've got a winemaker, because I was like, well, we have to have a winemaker if we're talking wine casks. So, yeah, no, it's.
You got a winemaker. You got a winemaker speaking at a whiskey show. That's great.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm getting rid of all you whiskey producers, rum producers, producers. Who wants whiskey at a whiskey show? George, you should know.
Sad, man.
If it's going to be alternative, it's going to be alternative. And you know, and I think with you guys that, you know, that 15-year-old has become so iconic. Why do you think that that's the kind of, you know, 10's great and I love it. And actually, when I went back to it, we did a tasting of it around Christmas last year, and I was like, I hadn't had 10 for ages, because I always go to 15 if I'm drinking your whiskey.
Yeah.
And I had the 10, and I was like, why have I not been drinking the 10? You know, it's like, so why do you think everyone's kind of gravitated to the 15? What about that do you think is really kind of?
I mean, it's always stood out for me. I mean, it does sort of sway, because I've always said it's my favorite one as well. It's always been that, you know, really good sort of price point. It's always sort of, you know, hovered around or just under the £50 sort of bracket. it's more common now, but we were definitely one of the first distilleries to have a whiskey at 46%. We've had this one at 46% for 50 plus years. So it's always had that little bit more strength to it. So it's had a little bit more of the aggression to it, but it's still got the depth and the finesse of a much bigger whiskey. Because we are using the sherry casks as well, we definitely find that you really need the extra sort of time to bring out those sort of flavors as well. But it just, like you said, it just stands out. I mean, it's not the 10-year-old, 12-year-old, it's not the 21, 25-year-old. The 10-year-old's a little bit shorter on the finish, 21-year-old's a little bit smoother. The 15's still got a little bit of that aggression coming through on it, but it's still got the finesse of an older whiskey too.
Yeah, and I think, one thing I really respect you guys for is keeping those age statements and being really consistent about that. And, again, probably because you don't have a marketing team. I blame marketing for everything.
So do I, actually.
And has that been really important to kind of keep that age statement and really be sort of like,
I mean, it's something that we've always, firmly believed in, that if you're going to spend this sort of money on a bottle of whiskey, I think you should know exactly what's in it. Mm-hmm. Rather than here's a 80 quid bottle of whiskey and it's called whatever. Pure pay the money, and it has it stood us in good stead. People definitely appreciate us for that. At certain points we ran out of 30 and 40-year-olds, so we just didn't do them for 2 years, until we managed to build up a little bit more stock, and it's just carried on since.
And I think that it's again going back to that thing about that consistency and giving a message to the customer that says, and transparency is huge now. I think for me, more and more so with the consumers, and I think maybe people are waking up to that a little bit, hopefully, in the whiskey industry, maybe.
Well, I mean, I certainly know a lot of other brands are certainly going back to age statements. So,
interesting.
So, yeah, but as you said, a lot of these companies are ruled by marketeers, and this is definitely going to work. And when you say things, you've got to stand by what you said, I suppose.
And I think often it's the marketing teams don't actually know anything about whiskey, which is probably half the problem. And maybe I've never talked to a customer either, which is maybe also a slight issue.
Quite possibly.
And I think what else do you think really is at the heart of Glenfarclas? Because we talked about the warehouses. I know you're still direct fire. You did go to steam at some point and then back to direct fire. Is that correct? Or
we tried it in one still for 3 weeks to do just as an experiment, but it didn't work. So we went back to direct firing all of them. I think what makes us who we are is because we've been in the same location for the whole time. We've never moved. When you do come visit Glenfarclas, you can see when you walk through it. You literally go. So here was where the maltings were. Here's the mash house. Here's the still house, and you're walking downhill the whole way. We were here before electricity, before we had pumps. Everything was gravity fed. It ran downhill, and you can see the history. I'm looking out at the warehouses just now. These buildings are over 200 years old. The office I'm in is over 200 years old. All these things are still here. It's got the history. It's got the heritage. We don't have to make it up.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's about that. People talk about kind of what makes a product, and it's not just about where it's located. It's about the people and the history that come behind it, because that all kind of feeds in. And there is something about Glenfarclas that does feel like it has a real sense of itself and its history. I think it is one of the brands, like I can look at other brands, which, I love, say Balvenie or something, and I don't get that same sense of something that's been there, or, that kind of and maybe that is why we love the 15, because when you have a glass, you've got a sense of who the people are, what the place is, and that kind of.
So I mean, I just remember we did an anniversary book for our 175th anniversary, and we're just about to redo it, and we're doing interviews today. But one of the gentlemen tomorrow that we're doing the interview with, he's been here 10 years, whatever, but his father worked here for 40 years before that. And then when you do start speaking to people here, they either have had other relations that have worked here, or they still have relations that work here. I mean, yes, we're a family business, but it's so many other families that are heavily involved in this place as well.
And do you think that kind of helps you keep that consistency, that you are having people that have, you know, will have come with stories from people that have worked before, and that kind of takes it through, not just from your own family, but through from theirs?
I guess it also gives them a huge sense of pride as well, because, you know, especially when you bring out a product and they'll be like, oh, that was the year that my, you know, father first started, or your father retired. You know, they make lots of different connections as well. So, you know, recently, well, just before lockdown, we started doing a selection process that we're trying to get everyone in the distillery to do. So, like, we just did the Stillman's dram, we're going to do the warehouse dram, we're going to do the warehouse, you know, bring everybody else involved into it, because they understand the brand so much as well.
Well, I mean, when we went round with two of your guys, and they were just, you know, they were so passionate. I mean, they were hysterically brilliant, and, you know, like, took the piss out of me all the way around, which I was like, I love you.
Is that just everybody that does that to you?
Yeah. I do open myself up to it, George, as you know. But, you know, it was so interesting, because you could tell that they were really, you know, it was theirs. It didn't matter.
They're so,
even though
they're so passionate about it, that they're so believe in the product. I mean, it's just unbelievable, you know, fantastic.
And so, you know, talking of things that are kind of coming down the line, what kind of exciting things are you looking forward to in terms of maybe products that you're kind of cooking away, besides what we sort of talked about with the different casks and things?
So hopefully, very hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a new 50-year-old out.
Ooh, yeah, we talked about it actually, because I think we were originally looking to launch that at Whisky Show. I have a funny feeling.
Ooh. Well, this stage, it wouldn't have been ready by then now anyway. It's definitely taking a little bit longer than we had originally hoped for. We've got there's little bits and pieces, but nothing. That's definitely the sort of the biggest one, I suppose, that's coming out.
And, you know, I think it's again, it's sort of testament. You don't feel the need to bring out something every 5 seconds, which is in itself quite refreshing, because sometimes I'm like, okay, really, we've brought out another product. The other one hasn't sold yet. Why have we done another one?
I know, said, I suppose we're starting to work on it now. We'll bring out a 70-year-old in 3 years. So that, as you know, to do these things, it takes a long time to get the packaging, to get the you know, everything done, I suppose. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't help right now when you can't get packaging and you can't talk to someone, and, you know, it makes everything that little bit more complicated.
Yeah, which has been a nightmare. And absolutely, I mean, you know, everyone sort of says, you know, how much has this, you know, virus sort of affected you? And people forget that it's been going on coming up for a year. You know, because I mean, it first started in China. So when they shut all the factories in China, that was it. You couldn't get packaging for that period of time. And then it was, you know, Italy, where the glass comes from. And, you know, it was just this knock-on effect that's just like kept going. And it's like, yeah. People think, oh, it's only been since March, but it's been much longer.
And you forget about that. You're right. You just think, actually, you know, it's you know, we've been sort of stuck for 4 months, whatever it is. But yeah, those knock-on effects have just kind of influenced everything. You know, I mean, it's funny. You know, at one point we were like, "What do you mean we can't get any famous grouse?" The distillery was shut, so, you know, at some point, can't get out the door.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, we've been fortunate. I mean, because we've never been like an on-premise brand. We've always been more off-premise, so we've sort of not been affected as badly. So.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, we've been really lucky. The retail side of things is really strong still, which is great to see. But, you know, do you, in terms of sort of Glenfarclas, you know, where would you ever think of sort of releasing a sort of in between age statement, because like an 18, or, you know, just, is there any time that you think, actually, I want to add something into the core range that's not, you know?
So I mean, there's a core range that we sell in the UK, but then there's another core range that we sell elsewhere. So we do I mean, our range is 8, 10, 12, 15, 17, 21, 25, 30, 40. But then in China, we do a 14-year-old. In Taiwan, we do a 13-year-old. You know, there's different countries where you do different sort of age products. But saying that, we've just pulled the 18-year-old. We're not going to do that anymore. I don't think we'd ever add specifically to our own range, but there obviously other countries do want to have something that's a bit more exclusive for them. So that's why they will do, like I said, you know, do a 13-year-old or 14-year-old.
And why do you think is it that idea of the exclusivity? Because I think, you know, people do now more and more so want exclusive, whether that's an exclusive task or, you know, something that's specific to that country. Is that kind of what you're seeing more and more? Is that people are demanding that? Or
more and more. I mean, it's got to the point, you know, where you have retailers wanting their own exclusive products.
Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah.
There you go. Actually, no, this one isn't. I was just like, is it? Oh, I'll check that.
It's
some retailers deserve orange.
That's true. But I mean, people always say, well, why do we have different ranges for different markets? Like in Canada, for example, it's probably the only market that we do actually everything in. But just because it's a crazy system, so you've got government-controlled stores, and then you've got private stores. So we have a different range for the private stores versus the government stores. So then we're not competing against each other. Different numbers that were appreciated in different countries. Strengths, what you could and couldn't sell different places. So.
And actually, strength is an interesting one, because I didn't realize that you guys were one of the first people to bottle at 46. And what was it about that sort of magic number that you guys felt that, you know, and yeah, I totally agree that kind of 46 plus is for me the kind of where I tend to drink at. But
yeah, I mean, as I said, I can't remember the exact year it sort of came out, but back then, you know, obviously everybody wanted everything at 40% because that was the lowest amount of tax that people were going to have to pay on it. So when you do put it up that little bit more, then it is different. But the flavor of it just makes it stand out. But I mean, it's really, as you sort of said, it's really come into its own in the last, you know, decade or so, because people's palates have changed. I mean, it's amazing when you go read the old history books about the fact, you know, single malt whiskey wasn't appealing to people's palates, so that's why it was all blended to make it drinkable. Whereas now it's the single malts that are absolutely booming because people do want those different flavors, different tastes.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? It's how people's palates evolve, and, you know, maybe eventually we'll swing back into blends, because that's kind of the nature of trends, is they kind of go around in circles. So yeah, when are you releasing your George?
When am I releasing what?
Your blended whiskey.
We do lots of blended whiskey.
Oh, with malt.
No, we do a super high premium blended whiskey in Spain called Highland Dream. We do a blend called Glendowen, which we sell in various different markets. We've got Highland Cattle in Germany, Eagle of Spain, Germany. There's quite a few different blends that we do.
Okay, I did not know that. You learn something new every day. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that must be quite different. I mean, totally different in terms of kind of how you look at them and how you produce. Of course.
I mean, it's not a big part of our business. I mean, it was just sort of done if you know, originally if a customer wanted or something, but it's nothing we promote or advertise or want to get into.
Interesting. I can see it now. So again, it's like, can we do a blend? We're bringing blends back, George.
He asked me about this years ago because he bought various amounts of whiskey. You brought a blend out or something, because he spoke to me about it a decade ago, and I was like,
nah.
Go speak to somebody that really wants to, you know, do it. So
you just spend your life saying no to Skinner in various ways.
I know. Can I tell you my favorite Skinner story?
Absolutely. Bearing in mind this is going to be broadcast. So make it clean.
Yeah, he'll never watch it. It was you were doing the 1953 coronation decanter, and so he'd contacted us and said, "I'd like to buy a cask in 1953," and I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Gave him the price, and as per Yosakinder does all the time, he phoned me, and it was a good hour and a half, phone call about him telling me how the market was, about how the whiskey I was trying to sell him was far too expensive, how when he was buying it from other people, there's always a margin of 15, 20% that they'll come back with. And I listened to all of his conversation, and he then came back. He then phoned me back a week and a half later, and he said, "You didn't phone me back." And I was like, "About what?" And he said, "About the 1953. I gave you that long lecture." And I was like, "Yeah, I listened to what you were saying." And he was like, "You're not changing the price, are you?" And I was like, "No. If you want to buy it, buy it. If you don't want to buy it, I don't really care." And he was like, "But everybody else folds." And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "So do you still want it?" And he was like, Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay, so any distributor or whiskey producer watching out now, that's not a true story, that's a lie. George came down on the price, a couple of thousand, knocked off.
Folded straight away.
Straight away. And that's part of whiskey, isn't it? These stories that we have about each other. We're such a close-knit industry.
Totally. Absolutely.
Like George and I were talking before we started recording about how much, we miss being out there and, seeing people, and I miss hugs. I mean, I need a huge hug.
The hug.
It says margarita. Which is
because you were saying you're speaking to Mark Gillespie after this. So I did Whisky Wednesday with him about a month ago with Brendan from Glenmorangie. And it was really funny because the three of us were together in New Zealand in March, and now we're all doing a Zoom tasting, and it's like how the world has got
insane.
Nuts.
Dave Broom got stuck for 7 weeks in New Zealand. It was like I just get wine again.
He did that. He did that on purpose. You do realize that? I mean, I was there with him.
How did you get back?
With difficulty. So I went to Australia afterwards, bumped into Alan Winchester in a really ropey hotel, but then ended up having to fly home through Singapore, which I was supposed to go back through Qatar.
This is partly, that was not coronavirus, just so everyone knows. This is partly kind of, I love it. That's awesome. Oh my God, I have to show you now. I love the fact now we've gone totally off piece. Sorry, folks. Now.
Sorry, what were we talking about?
Now we're just going to show each other pictures of Dave Broom in various different. So I have a fantastic Dave Broom picture. So for those of you who don't know, we just did 24 hours of rum not long ago, and we felt that we needed Dave Broom there with us for 24 hours. That is Dave Broom life size.
It was probably more expensive than getting the real one.
I had the real one as well. It was just on Zoom.
Oh my God.
This is it. This is our community, and we're gutted that we can't do physical whiskey show. But I think we're going to have to bring George back to do a couple of real life, in brackets, virtual tastings and things for the whiskey show, because we love having you, George. And I want to just thank you for
miss you.
I missed you. And craziness with you. Maybe a couple of maybe if you're down in London, you just give me a holler, and I'll hop in a cab.
I'm coming down in October for the whiskey show. I've told everyone thinks it's still on. Don't tell anybody. I've booked the week in London.
So Whiskey Show Physical apparently is still happening for George. George only George. No, George, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now, but it is always an absolute pleasure to have you on and talk to you, because it is always entertaining. definitely it's never serious, which is probably the best way to be. But thank you, George, and we cannot wait to see you.
Thank you, Dawn.
The whole shabam. So I shall stop the recording. I'm becoming a professional at stopping Zoom.